All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Contracts and Forms Update webinar. My name is Matt Holder, and I'm the Education Director here at the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission. And today I'm joined by our Deputy Director, Bailey Crotty, and one of our investigators, Patrick Schrank. And today what we're going to do together is we're going to go through some of the most substantial updates that were made to the 2025 Contracts and Forms. Those are with the editor right now being formatted for all of your different platforms and making them fillable. So then as they get to your vendors, they can go ahead and make those fillable for your specific platform. Those will be available for use January 1st. So you'll be able to have those forms on January 1st or by January 1st to make sure that you have the appropriate forms that you're using. One thing that people always ask is, okay, if I already have a contract signed and it's in December and then we have new forms come out, do I need to change the form? The answer is no, you don't need to do that. Just go ahead and utilize and take that contract through closing. Anything new that you write, of course, if you are utilizing the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission forms, go ahead and use those updated forms. And those, again, will be available through your e-signature platforms very, very soon. So we're going to go over some of the highlights today of the 2025 contracts and forms. This will take care of one of the 6 hours of CE that is required. Every year we will do a contracts and forms webinar. Of course, we are doing in-person events as well. So if you do see that in the newsletter, come on out and join us at one of our events that we are speaking at. That is with contracts and forms, so you can make sure that you're not waiting till the last week of the last month of your license term to get 6 hours of contracts and forms. Also, take a look at our website under the Education tab, and you can find a list of CE courses that are available. Just search the word contracts there and find one of our amazing education providers across the state to dive into some of these contracts and forms a little bit deeper. So as we get started today, if you missed our last webinar in, let's see, October it was, for the 2024 license code and rules, there's a QR code that's showing on your screen now. I got the direction right this time. Over here to my left, in the center of the screen there, you'll see a QR code, and you can scan that code and it will take you to the YouTube video that goes over the most substantial contract or code and rule updates rather that were effective November 1st of 2024. There was a lot of changes that took place that went into effect November 1st of 2024. So if you haven't already gotten a chance to really understand what rules did change and how it impacts you or you as a broker, then make sure to get on and watch that video. Replays of that webinar are not available for CE credit. So at the end of that webinar, it does show a QR code to scan and get CE credit, but since you're watching the replay of that one, it's not available for CE. But all of you joining us live this morning know that at the end of this session, you will also see a QR code that you can scan and get CE credit. So if you missed out on the 2024 license code and rule update, you can scan that QR code there. Another thing that we launched is a speaker request form for the Real Estate Commission. So sometimes we have brokers ask that a member of our team comes out to their brokerage, or maybe there's an event happening that you would like a speaker from the Real Estate Commission to come out and talk on a specific topic. And we are always happy to do that, either joining you virtually, or if we can come out and speak with you and your team, your audience in person. We made it very, very easy for you to do. All you have to do is scan that QR code there that's on the screen right now, and you can put in the event details, the date, all the information that we need to know, and then a member of our licensing team will reach out and confirm those details with you, get somebody scheduled with you, and make sure that we're all there and set up for success at your event. So make sure to get that QR code scanned. I'll leave it up there for a few more seconds. Of course, this webinar will be available on YouTube as well. So if you don't catch the QR code, make sure to, well, I guess our team will put it in the chat. They're reminding me that they're putting it in the chat right now. So thank you. Our team behind the scenes, they're monitoring your questions. They are going to be taking your questions and comments. After our session today, we'll take all of those questions. If we need to create a frequently asked questions resource guide or provide any additional information to all of you that are watching today, we will certainly do that. So as you go through and listen to the webinar today, you can feel free to leave us a comment. We will look at all of those after the webinar today. We also have our investigators joining live, so some of your questions may get answered by our investigators when they're not up here presenting. Next, in order to request an office inspection, our investigators go out to brokerages and help you do an office inspection. Now, this is a really, really great resource for brokers to utilize and make sure that you're running things the way that they need to be ran and that you are in compliance. So a lot of brokers have requested this. Again, we made it easier on you to request this type of office inspection. So if you want to, brokers in the room or joining us today, scan that QR code there that's on the screen right now. Again, that link will be put in the chat as well. And you can request an office inspection from one of our investigators and they'll come out, meet with you, go through your compliance and ensure that you are in compliance with the Real Estate Commission license code and rules. As we get into the webinar today, we wanted to thank the Contract Forms Committee and kind of tell you a little bit about the Contract Forms Committee. So really, they revised the contracts and forms. There's a library of 80 different contracts and forms that are available for free public or optional use, and you can now get to those forms through your license portal. So you log into your license portal, and on the left-hand side of the screen, it will say Contract Forms. There, all of the forms are available. The contract forms works throughout every year to create new contracts and forms based on your suggestions. So if you have feedback on any of the changes that were made or additional changes that you'd like to see, make sure to email us and let us know, because we take those all to the Contract Forms Committee and we have great discussion there and make the changes that are good for both the licensee and the consumer. And then we also, of course, review those suggestions from you to revise and create contract forms. The Contract Forms Committee consists of 13 members. That was effective November 1st of 2024. There used to be 11 members. Now there's 13. 2024 has been a busy year. I know nothing really has changed in the real estate industry. There's been a lot of change, right? We met a total of 10 times. And now these experts are volunteers from across the state of Oklahoma that are volunteering their time to the benefit of consumers and licensees across the state. So if you know somebody that is a member of the Contract Forms Committee, please thank them next time you see them, because they met a total of 10 times. I would say the shortest meeting that we had was probably an hour and a half. Longest was knocking on the door 4 hours. So we want to give a special thank you to the Greater Tulsa Association of Realtors and the Oklahoma City Metro Association of Realtors, the volunteers from both organizations that worked in collaboration to make this year's changes. We had great discussion and effort to create statewide forms. So everybody from Tulsa and the Tulsa market area, along with Oklahoma City and our rural areas in between and across the state, had a chance to make edits to the contracts and forms so that they could be used across the state in different markets. So now we are very excited about the work that was done on that committee. And again, thank you to GTAR and Oakmar for all of the hours of cooperation and consideration and expertise that was brought to the committee. If you want to follow along today, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now. We'll also have that linked in the chat to where you can look at the 60-something page contract change guide. And this highlights every single change that was made to all of the contracts and forms. So if you want to have something to, physically or have on your screen so you can see it maybe a little bit bigger, go ahead and scan that QR code. Again, we'll also put a link in the messages below. At the very end of our session today, you'll be able to scan a QR code to receive CE credit. Or if you cannot scan the QR code, then we will also provide a link at the end of the session today. So don't leave early. Make sure that you stay till the end so you can get that 1 hour of contract forms credit. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our investigator, Patrick Schrank, and he's going to take you through some of the residential sales.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to take you first through the residential sale contract and show you some of the changes that we made on this form. So the first one you'll notice, the cooperative compensation supplement. We actually made that change in our July revision of the contract, and so hopefully you've already had a chance to experience that change. One other change that we're making for the 2025 is to add the proof of funds or pre-qualification letter option under the attachments, so you can attach that as a part of your contract. Also on the residential sale, we've added a definition of delivery to the contract. So it's a little bit more clear what constitutes delivery. And then we've also added in there a clause that allows the earnest money if a deal busts and there's no negotiation reached or terms reached with the TRR negotiation, that the earnest money is going to automatically go back to the buyer. Still probably best practice to have a signed release, but we've added some expanded language there to clarify. Under the accessories and equipment, we've added generators and solar panels if owned, just kind of conforming to some of those new items that we've seen pop up in houses over the last couple years. Under 10C, this is the land or boundary survey. Again, working with that Greater Tulsa Association of Realtors and kind of conforming to some of the differences that we have in the different practices throughout the state. We've now added an option to choose who's going to pay for the survey, buyer or seller. In different markets, it's different kind of who customarily pays for that. And so in order to get those statewide forms, this is a change that we made to allow the flexibility of the different practices across the state. Under 10D, we clarified some language regarding the title requirements or objections and when those need to be delivered and who they need to be delivered to. Under 10E, this actually came from a suggestion or a question or several questions that we had this last year regarding if there are title issues found, when exactly does that delay start? And so we've now clarified it to be an extension beyond the closing date. So whatever date is or whatever time frame is put in that provision will be from the closing date, an extension from the closing date. And then under paragraph 16, we've added some clarification of delivery of written notice and where that needs to go if a seller is breaching the contract. All right, let's take a look at the residential property condition disclosure. Just a couple changes this year. We added fire suppression systems and then date of last inspection on that form. So if you have a property that has a built-in fire suppression system, you can put that on the disclosure. Also built-in ice maker. So if you have one of those in the property, you can now disclose its working or non-working condition. On the listing agreement, the exclusive right to sell, in conformance with the new code and rules that went into effect on November 1st, that says that brokerage agreements can't be more than 1 year in length. We've just added a little disclaimer there that it cannot exceed that 12 months in duration. All right. Again, hopefully you've already had a chance to use this section of the form. This was in the July revision as well, in response to some of those practice changes that we saw this last year. Camera just went off. Now it's back on.
you.
Good. Okay. Uh, um, Hopefully, you've had a chance to already experience this in your practice the last couple months. But this is the new commission breakup or the commission portion of the exclusive right to sell. We have a full video on this new listing agreement that we published back a couple months ago. I definitely recommend checking it out if you need more information about this. But we did want to highlight this since it is a change that we made this last year. Under the, again, still in the listing agreement, we've added the accessories, equipment, and systems paragraph directly from the residential sale into the listing agreement, along with inclusions and exclusions. So now it's very clear to the seller what they're going to be reserving, and then you just need to make sure that that's reflected as well in the purchase contract. So now they understand what's going to be conveyed, and if they need to exclude anything or include anything in that contract, they can do so right there on the listing agreement. And then paragraph 11, we've added an indemnification paragraph that basically says if something happens during the listing period, that the seller is going to indemnify the broker and the agent of their liability for any damages. Paragraph 14, we just kind of clarified the fair housing language, federal and Oklahoma language, make sure that it's all consistent, and then added a little disclaimer at the end, or any other factor protected by federal, state, or local law. Under paragraph 17, it had some language regarding compensation through MLS. Obviously, since the practice changes, that's not a practice anymore, and so we've removed that language. Again, in the listing agreement, we added a paragraph in there regarding taking of photos and videos, essentially that the seller acknowledges that people are going to come into the house, they might take some photos of the house when it's listed, and that the seller agrees that they can do so. And then on the last page of that listing agreement, we've added all the relevant contact information for both the associate, the seller, and the associate's broker. So it's all in one place. It's really easy for everyone to know who is a part of that transaction. So here is the seller information. And then as a part of the changes this year, we also removed the broker duties from the listing agreement. The listing agreement was one of those contracts, I believe one of the only contracts that we had that the disclosure of broker duties were actually integrated into that contract. And so to bring it into more consistency with our other forms, we've separated that disclosure of broker duties into its separate page. That is the final page of the listing agreement. So just like the residential sale that you're familiar with, where you do a disclosure of broker duties, you do one for the listing agreement as well. All right, so now we're going to move on to the TRR. And as a licensee myself, who used to practice real estate, I'm very excited about this change. I think that this could be a really a great change for the real estate industry here in Oklahoma. The TRR process can be very confusing and very cumbersome, and really just not a lot of fun. And I think our old form kind of played into that as well, that it was a confusing and kind of just all over the place process. So we've tried to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more clear to both consumers and licensees with this new form. So we've split it into 2 pages. So the first page, the first question is, are you asking for repairs or are you not? That's it. So either you're going to ask for repairs or you're not, and you check one of those boxes. If you're going to ask for repairs, the first section under asking for repairs is termite treatment, just like before. And then you would put whatever repairs that you are asking for. And then if you need additional pages, you can always do so. The buyer signs the front and submits it to the seller. Then here's the second page of that TRR. So what's the first thing the seller is going to do? They're either going to accept or they're going to modify those TRRs. So they're going to accept it and say, yes, we're going to do all those things that the buyer asked for, or they're going to say, we're going to amend the list that the buyer submitted. Similar to a counteroffer, if it's not amended on that, in this section, the first page is going to stand. So they're going to either accept or amend and sign. And then the buyer has the option to sign and say, yes, we agree to the modifications, or they're going to start back at the first process and go through it again. The final section on this page is if the basically if the TRR negotiations fail and they want the buyer still wants to purchase that property even though they're not going to get any of their repairs that they asked for. We made that change in the contract to reflect that the buyer has the ability to do that. And so now if the buyer wants to still purchase that property, they're within their time frame in the TRR negotiations, they can sign this section that basically says, we're going to take it like it is. We're not asking for any repairs. And then they would sign and submit it back to the seller. All right. Under the land with or without dwelling contract, the land contract, we've added the definition of title evidence. Again, just kind of bringing it into conformance with our other contracts. And then under the farm ranch, we've updated the associate fields, again, just to kind of match our other forms so that they're consistent throughout all of them. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Matt.
Thank you, Patrick. So on the vacant lot or tract contract, we added clarifying language here regarding the release of earnest money that is held by the title company. So you'll see the language, the change highlighted below on your screen. So it says in the event earnest money is held in escrow at a title company, the earnest money may only be released pursuant to paragraph 17B, 1, 2, or 3. So it's making reference to paragraph 17B, 1, 2, or 3, which is those options that are listed above. So that we just added some clarifying language there on that vacant lot or tract contract. And then on the signature page, we removed the date field for the associate section and added the associate phone number field. So now you'll be able to see the contact information very easily, much like on all of our other contracts and forms. Moving on to the buyer broker service agreement. Now, I will tell you that we're kind of going to fly through some of this because we did publish, I believe it was an hour-long video on the buyer broker service agreement, and we had a webinar where over 1,000 of you joined. That we went through the buyer broker agreement that was released in July ahead of those practice changes that went into effect this year. So if you want more detailed information about the buyer broker agreement, then please go and reference that video that we have on YouTube. And again, our team is behind. They are taking your questions and looking at those, but we'll also include that link in the chat to the buyer broker video. So if you want to go and look at that, we definitely encourage you to do so. But the first slide here, we added language for the real estate practice changes that required a written agreement before showing properties. So that is paragraph number 2 there in the buyer broker service agreement. Next, we added the language for the buyer affidavit. And now this comes from Senate Bill 212 that was in effect in 2023. And this is where the buyer is acknowledging that Oklahoma law requires a buyer to sign an affidavit at closing, and they're attesting that the buyer is either a U.S. citizen, Native American, or a non-citizen who is or shall become a bona fide resident of Oklahoma. Now, we put this in the buyer broker agreement so that you, as the agent, when you are having that buyer consultation, you have a reminder to go ahead and have that conversation on the upfront. So there's no surprises when you get to the closing table. We certainly don't want you to have to go through all of the work only to find out at closing that the buyer is either A, unwilling to make that, to sign the affidavit, or B, unable to sign that affidavit. So make sure to put this a part of that buyer consultation process so you can have that conversation with your buyer at the appropriate time. Next, we added language for allowing either party to terminate the buyer broker service agreement by providing 3 days written notice. So now your buyers, they should have some comfort in knowing in that buyer consultation, hey, if this doesn't work out for you or it doesn't work out for me, we can fire each other with 3 days written notice. So make sure to explain that portion of the agreement to them. It's paragraph 6. And another portion that's sort of protecting both of you is that they are still required to compensate you as their real estate agent for any properties that you make available to them within a certain amount of time, for agreements that are executed within a certain amount of time. If that portion is left blank, it's 60 days. That's not something that we necessarily recommend. It's based upon what makes sense for you and that buyer's specific needs. So, for example, if you're showing a buyer who's wanting new construction, well, it takes longer than 60 days to get a house from framing to a certificate of occupancy and closing. So you may want to have a longer time frame in that termination clause there if they are looking at new construction. Sometimes a buyer can go out on a Saturday and meet the builder, and one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden you don't get your commission. So you want to make sure that your buyer understands that, hey, this is an agreement between you and I, and there is some protection there if you don't have you don't have a very good working relationship. Next, paragraph 7. This is where I will recommend that you go and watch our buyer broker agreement video, because we take each one of these paragraphs provision by provision. But what I will tell you is this: there's 3 ways that you can be compensated. Section 7A is where you're putting in either a dollar amount or a percentage that you agree to work for with that buyer. Paragraph B is if you are charging a retainer fee. Now, retainer fees, one thing you'll want to know is that retainer fees are due and payable immediately, and they are non-refundable. So again, you'll want to make sure that your buyer understands that and know that any fees that you are collecting from a client, those are to be paid to your broker, not you personally. And then C, this is to allow the form to have a little bit of flexibility. So you want to make sure that if you are filling out box C, that you have your broker's permission, because again, this client, as a sales associate, they aren't paying you, they're paying your broker, and then your broker is paying you what they are paying them, or a portion of that. So you want to make sure that if you are listing something in paragraph C that is a little bit unconventional, that you run that past your broker and your compliance department to make certain that it is in line with their policies and procedures. Again, below paragraph 7C there, it does say that the compensation, again, is enforced a certain number of days. So you can put 60 days there if you want. You can put a certain number of days after the expiration or termination of this agreement if the property acquired was presented to the buyer through brokerage services of the broker. So it's sort of restating what we just went over in paragraph 6. So you want to make sure, if we're stating it twice, you might want to go ahead and state it twice to your client, because that would be quite uncomfortable if you got to that point and never explained that to them. Next, failure to close language. We moved the language regarding buyers' failure to close to its own paragraph. And this was a move for transparency for the buyer. So if the seller fails to close and it's no fault of the buyer, then the compensation is waived. So that, again, should offer your buyers great comfort, because they're signing this document saying, oh, I'm going to be paying you this amount. And then if you don't close, well, if they don't close, if the deal does not close and it's as of no fault on the buyer, then the compensation is waived. However, if the transaction does not close and it's due to a breach of the contract of sale from the buyer, the compensation is not waived and it is immediately due and payable. So again, you want to make certain that you go over that really well with your buyers. So what happens when you have a buyer, you're working with a buyer and they look at a property and the seller is offering compensation to the buyer's broker? Well, that is all handled in paragraph 9. Again, if you want a very detailed explanation of this, go ahead and click the link after the webinar today and check out our video on the buyer broker service agreement. But there are 3 ways or 3 scenarios that are outlined here. A goes over if the seller's offer is equal to the compensation that you've already agreed to. So if the amount of compensation offered by the seller is equal to the compensation that you already have listed in paragraph 7, the buyer is not obligated to separately pay the compensation that's listed in paragraph 7. So what happens if the offer is greater than the compensation? So let's say you agreed to $1 in paragraph 7 and the seller is paying you $5. Well, paragraph 9b goes over that. Compensation to buyer's broker must not exceed the compensation agreed to between the buyer and the broker in paragraph 7 of the agreement. If seller's offer of compensation is greater than the compensation listed in paragraph 7, the buyer is not obligated to separately pay the compensation in paragraph 7. The amount of compensation offered by the listing broker or seller that is greater than the compensation listed in paragraph 7 may be addressed by further written agreement, and it may include one of 3 options. It can either be a credit to the buyer, it can be a credit to the seller, or another option that is agreed to in writing by the parties. So any option that is selected, again, this is in bold, so if it's in bold, it's extremely important. These things have to be agreed to in writing by the parties. So you want to make sure that if you are finding yourself in this scenario, that you get everything in writing and signed. 9C goes over in the event a seller's offer is less than the compensation that you have listed in paragraph 7. So in the event that that compensation is less, then is what is in paragraph 7, the buyer shall pay the remaining balance of the compensation unless, again, otherwise agreed to in writing by the parties. So sometimes you may want to have your buyer pay that difference. Other times, maybe you don't. Either way, you need to go ahead and have that in writing and make sure it's agreed to. We added on the signature page here, we added the buyer and the buyer broker's contact information to the signature page, so it's clear for everybody that's involved in that buyer broker agreement. Now, the people that are going to be seeing this buyer broker agreement are, of course, you as the buyer's broker, the buyer or the buyers that are going to be signing. The title company may want a copy of this. Of course, this needs to be on file with your broker, but understand that if you're not a party to this contract, it should not be shared. So you're not giving this buyer broker agreement to listing agents, for example. So make sure that you understand that as well. We also have included the disclosure of brokerage duties and services as the final page to the buyer broker service agreement. So you can see that is the same form that has been listed in our other contracts. We went ahead and added that to the buyer broker service agreement. The next form that we made some pretty substantial changes to is the seller's counteroffer. So we reformatted this form to make it a lot more simple and easy to use. Previously, the form made it to where you had to reference every paragraph of the contract that you are changing. So if you were changing paragraph 2, you would have to list paragraph 2 in that first box. Now all you have to do is select, just put a check mark by what portion of the contract that you are changing and then what you're changing. So we would see a lot of times where people would just write in something and make no reference to the portion of the contract that was being changed and modified. And so that's already not going along with what the contract said. So now you don't have to worry about that. There's paragraph references to that contract of sale, and you can select all that apply. You have the additional provisions box on the right side of the form. So if there are edits to the additional provisions, or you want to add an additional provision there, you can select that box and make a note of that. Supplements, that used to say financing supplements. Now it is just supplements. So you can make modifications to any supplements that are attached to the purchase offer. Next, we added new paragraph language allowing the buyer to reject or submit a buyer's counteroffer to the seller's counteroffer form. And we added clarifying language regarding when a counteroffer should be signed, and clarified that initials on a counteroffer are used for acknowledgement purposes only. And you'll see that as you are working with all of our contracts and forms. If you are having a buyer initial something, that is simply acknowledgement. And the reason that we do this is so that every buyer knows that they have seen each page of that contract. So when they are initialing, it is simply acknowledgement. When they are signing their full signature, that is agreement. So there's we have that in bold at the bottom where that note is as well. For the buyer's counteroffer to the seller's counteroffer form, you'll see that that is mimicking the seller's counteroffer. So there's the same checkbox, the same checkboxes there to where you can easily select what's being changed and make appropriate note there. And again, the same goes for this form. Initials equals acknowledgement, and signature equals agreement. Next, we have the FHA and various loan supplements. So I believe I'm going to pass it back to Patrick. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this suggestion actually came from a lender. So, sometimes in the licensee world or in the realtor world, we always think that these contracts are for our use, and we're the only ones who are affected by them, and the buyers and sellers. But we've got to remember, title companies use these contracts, lenders look at these contracts, and so we also need to make sure that they work for them. So in this case, the amendatory clause that's a part of the FHA, Native American, and VA loans was incorporated in our financing supplement. So it was signed along with all the other terms of the financing supplement. That was actually creating some issues for lenders. Their underwriters were requiring it to be explicitly signed so that both buyer and seller understand that that term is part of the contract. And just having it incorporated in the addendum wasn't sufficient. So what was happening is that buyers and sellers were having to sign additional forms with the exact same language, but because it needed to be explicitly signed, it was creating this a little bit of confusion, and we're redoing work, and so we wanted to fix that issue. So we've actually pulled that amendatory clause into its own section with its own signature block in in all the FHA, Native American, and VA loans. And so throughout those supplements, you'll see that amendatory clause is on the third page, or it's on the third page with all of those. On the FHA, it's on the same page as the certification. So hopefully that fixes that issue going forward. On the backup supplement, we didn't have an address on that before, or a way to tie it to a property. So we've now added the address field, so it's in line, so we know what property that goes to. And then under the addendum, we kind of simplified the descriptor of the property. So before it had some county references, a little bit cumbersome. We've made it simple so that it's really easy for you to fill that out. With that, estimated net sheet, I'm going to pass it to Bailey.
Thank you, Patrick. To keep us going on the estimated net to seller, we removed the all on VA language from the settlement or closing fee table in accordance with loan policy changes from the VA itself. Next, on the disclosure of beneficial and familial interest, this is a new form that was implemented in the 2024 forms, and we received great feedback and suggestions from licensees just like you on this form to add the ability for a licensee to disclose their status as a purchaser or a seller. And so you can see here, we updated the title of the form and also added a fourth box in a area for someone to designate that they're acting as a purchaser or a seller. Next, on the residential lease application, you'll notice that some of the previous versions of the forms different language was a little older. For instance, where we now have email, it previously said pager. So we took a hard look at this form, moved this line up a bit to be closer to the applicant's actual contact information, and changed some of the language to be a little bit more modern. And then this slide is really for two forms, the residential property management form and the listing agreement with the right to lease form. Both had language that had to be updated due to practice changes. Those previous paragraphs had language about unilateral compensation. So of course, late this summer, we updated these forms to remove that language. And then we have 3 disclosure of broker duties, responsibilities, and services forms. We have one for just a buyer, one for a seller, and one for a landlord or tenant. And on the buyer and seller, we consolidated some of the options. You can see here option agreement and exchange agreement. In the case that you're attaching it to one of those types of sales, you can always just fill out other and put in whatever type of contract you're signing. We did this to make room and free up some space to add the items on our next slide, which are the new law changes that went into effect November 1 regarding compensation and disclosures and the length of term that those compensation agreements can be for. Then we also created 2 new forms this year. And if you haven't heard about the Cooperative Compensation Supplement, this was made in conjunction with the updates to our buyer-broker agreement and updates on the residential sale as well, and our listing agreement for practice changes. So this Cooperative Compensation Supplement is really an opportunity for the buyer to present a negotiation for buyer-broker compensation if that's what's occurring, and attach it to their offer on the residential sale. And if you haven't checked out our video on the buyer-broker agreement, I highly recommend you do so and take a look out for this form as well. And then, of course, with the updates to the buyer-broker agreement, we wanted to make a simple form for the licensees to be able to easily amend or extend the buyer-broker agreement just like they can on the listing agreement. We implemented this very same form for the listing agreement in 2024, and now here you're seeing this one for the buyer-broker agreement in 2025. And then I'm going to get into some of our miscellaneous changes that are applicable to multiple forms. Here you can see on the header of all forms except for the buyer-broker agreement, we have updated or added language that says property identifier. Previously, some of the forms might have said property address or not had this blank at all. And we decided for consistency to help you, your broker, and your transaction coordinators out to add that right to the header of all forms except, of course, the BBA. And we chose the word property identifier because we felt that that was more encompassing for other contracts that might not be related to a specific address. And then this is a very well sought out change that we implemented this year. The buyer initial, seller initials, and other types of initials at the bottom of pages were implemented in 2024. However, we got some feedback, again, from licensees just like yourself, to make that that section a little bit more consolidated, and also add in a tag that clarifies to the consumer that the initials are for acknowledgement purposes only. And so you'll see this change made on all forms that are multiple pages. Next change on all forms, we are updating the titles for the licensees from selling and listing broker to buyer and seller broker. And this is really just for consumer clarity. A lot of consumers don't understand selling versus listing, but when they hear buyer versus seller, that's very clear to them whose associate is whose and what that information is regarding. And then we found in some of our confirmation of disclosure pages that there was a redundant address added into the form itself. And so because it has the property identifier at the top now, we've removed that redundant address. And that way it's a little bit easier to fill out and find that address right away. And then our final change, and it seems like there's so many this year, there's over 65 pages in the contract change guide. Our final page is regarding standard clauses. So some of our GTAR volunteers pointed out that there is currently an extension allowed in the residential sale agreement for GTAR. And we discussed this change. And as trying to get on statewide forms, we decided to add this language as an option under our standard clauses form. Now, if you're not aware of the standard clauses form, if you go to the contract form page under your license portal and look for the standard clauses page, you'll see a list of over 20 options for you to add as modifiers to contracts as needed. And so here in this language, what we suggest is dropping this if you would like an extension, if you're a GTAR member and you're used to that. You can drop this language into additional provisions and modify the days as needed. We've put 3 here. If you haven't checked out the standard clauses, we find that when licensees learn about it, they are like, why didn't I hear about this before? And it's really useful, so I recommend going and checking that form out. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Matt.
Thank you so much, Bailey. And we actually got through, surprisingly, all 65 pages of forms very, very quickly. So we again want to reemphasize that if you have suggestions as you're working with all of our forms through 2025, that you go ahead and email us and submit those to our help desk email, which is help@orec.ok.gov. And it was a big request for a very long time that Tulsa members or Tulsa licensees and licensees from across the state were able to use contracts and forms that were published by the Real Estate Commission in line with how they do business in Tulsa. And so with that request, our Contract and Forms Committee worked very hard through 2024 in collaboration with the Greater Tulsa Association of Realtors to actually bring that change to fruition. So we again want to thank all of the members who volunteered their time and made that possible. So I again want to emphasize that we are listening and we will take your feedback and suggestions to the Contract Forms Committee and have great discussion there for additional changes. Our next commission meeting is going to be December 11th, and it starts at 9:30. This year, effective November 1st, your continuing education hours increased from 21 hours to a total of 30 hours. Now, you've heard already through, of course, the newsletter that we're not going to deny a renewal through June 1st of 2025. So through June 1st of 2025, you are still able to actually renew your license with 21 hours of continuing education credit. Now, I say that because we did that not only for our software vendor to be able to actually go forward and implement that change in our software, but also for all of our educators across the state to change their continuing education packages from 21 hours to 30 hours. The commission meetings are a fantastic way for you to get elective CE credit. And of course, joining us for these webinars today, everybody that is joining us live on this webinar will be able to get 1 hour of continuing education credit for the contracts and forms. Now, contracts and forms, that category increased to 6 hours through effective June 1st of 2025. So if your license is going to be renewed after that June 1st deadline, you want to make sure that you get 6 hours of contracts and forms. You can check out our website at orec.ok.gov to find a full list of continuing education courses. And what we'd encourage you to do is, of course, take CE not on the last week of the last month of your license renewal, but spread this out. Our Contracts and Forms Committee works throughout the year, every year, to update contracts and forms. And so utilize every year of your renewal period to take some free CE, especially from the commission and our educators across the state. And then, of course, come and join us here at the commission on December 11th at 9:30 for our commission meeting to get some continuing education credit and hear what we've got in store for 2025. And again, if you are joining us live, you will get CE credit, and I'll show that QR code here in just a minute. Our mobile app, I believe about 5,000 people have downloaded this mobile app, and now we can officially say it's award-winning. So we have an award-winning mobile app, and if you have not downloaded it already, we highly encourage you and recommend that you download this app to have the resources from the commission easily accessible in your pocket. On the iOS QR code is for Apple, and then of course Android is for Android or the Google Play Store. So you can scan one of those QR codes on the screen when the camera pops up. Click the yellow link that shows up there. On our mobile app, you can see the 2024 effective November 1st, 2024 license code and rules. That's searchable there. You can also bookmark things in the code and rules. If you have a question, for instance, on advertising, you can search the word advertising or advertise, and it will show you everywhere in the code and rules that word is mentioned. There's also the public registry there. So when you are filling out these contracts and forms, you can easily access brokers' license numbers or sales associate license numbers. Of course, we have our resources there where there's a ton of PDF downloads and checklists for compliance. And then we also have our video library that you can see there. And that video library, we're constantly adding to it. You can always check out our webinars. We post those webinars on YouTube. So if you are watching this and it is on YouTube, then you cannot get CE credit because we'd have to give you a test for that. But you can at least go back and view the content if you are not able to join us live.